It's common to hear leaders promise to rebuild in the wake of devastating storms, but the difference between that promise and reality often comes down to money. Stephen Bush is a Jacksonville attorney who's been working to reveal what he says is a systemic problem of insurance denial, and he joins us now. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
So I want to start with a story of a couple of clients of yours that recently aired on 60 Minutes because their story really is a stark portrait of what you're talking about. This is a couple that lives in Southwest Florida. Their home was largely destroyed in Hurricane Ian, massive damage to the roof, a tree through it, um, a lot of their possessions ruined from the rain. And the initial insurance adjuster that was sent to assess the damage said they were owed about $231,000. In the end, the insurance company offered 15. Um, why? First of all, what happened there between the amount that their adjuster initially said and recommended and what they were offered?
Well, I can't talk too much about that because this is an ongoing case, but based upon what was aired on 60 Minutes, the adjuster for the insurance company did come out, assess the damages, and he wrote an estimate. He sent that estimate into the third party administration company. And somewhere between the third party administrator and the insurance company, that estimate got changed and lowered, like you said, from 230 some odd thousand down to about 15,000, and
Which after their deductible ended up being basically about
about
$10,000.
$10,000. That's right. And the insurance company represented that estimate was of the field adjusters, which was incorrect.
And not just that field adjuster and not just that couple. So you contend that that is not an uncommon problem.
It's not an uncommon problem, and that's what we're finding over and over again with multiple carriers. Insurance companies are purposely taking their own adjusters' reports, reducing them down to avoid payment.
And I want to talk about the mechanism that they use to do that in just a bit. But let's just start, if we can, with the beginning. I mean, how did you first learn that this was happening?
So I took a deposition a while back. This was probably 2.5, 3 years ago. And during that deposition of the field adjuster, I showed the field adjuster the estimate that was sent to my client. And he said, "Well, that's not my estimate. I didn't write that estimate." And I said, "Well, what estimate did you write?" And he gave that to me. And at the time, I didn't think very much of it. I get to speak all over the country at different conferences. And at a conference, some adjusters for the insurance company saw me speak and afterwards said, "Hey, look, we would like to come to Florida and talk to you about some things." And I said, "Well, yeah, sure, come on. Why not?" And so they flew down and they showed me over and over and over again where their estimates had been changed. And I said, "Well, all of this is good, but how do we know that this is happening? And where, how do we get the information, the evidence, right?" And so they showed me through Xactimate, the program that most insurance companies and contractors and public adjusters use to create these estimates, who changed what, when it was changed, and how it was changed. And so my next question, of course, to them was, "Well, did anyone talk to you about changing this estimate? Did anyone tell you that they were changing it? Did anyone ask you to change it?" And the answer was no. And then those estimates were sent to the policyholders with those reduced amounts and were represented to the policyholders that that's what those adjusters had actually written for. And so they were getting calls from policyholders screaming at them saying, "Hey, you were here. You told me that I needed a new roof. My interior was wet. You were going to pay for this drywall. And now they're not paying for it. Why did you do this? Why did you tell me one thing and something else happened?" And they were like, "Well, no, I didn't turn that in to the insurance company. I turned in for them to fully pay." But it gets worse than that. They're actually there's some of these that we have where the insurance company has taken and deleted photographs from the photo report that shows the damage. That's how bad it is.
So typically what happens, I mean, a field adjuster, sometimes they work directly for the insurance company. Sometimes after a big storm, they're hired to come in and help out because there are so many damage assessments that need to be done.
That's right.
And they do an assessment, they send it in, and sometimes there's a conversation, right, about between someone representing the insurance company and the field adjuster about maybe modifications or changes.
Right, and I think there should be. I think that insurance companies absolutely have the right to change estimates if there is no coverage. I'll give you a great example: screen enclosures or pool covers, as we call them. Um, if you have a pool cage and you don't have coverage for that, but yet the adjuster wrote for a pool cage to be replaced or repaired because he didn't know or didn't have the policy at the time to look at the coverages, the insurance company absolutely has a right to remove that pool cage from that estimate. However, they should be collaborating with the adjuster before they do it. And secondly, the estimates that we're seeing have been reduced up to 90%. 75 to 90%, these estimates are being reduced. That's a problem.
So this is not necessarily a secret. After Hurricane Ian, there was some testimony before uh, the House Committee on Commerce, the Commerce Committee. This was in December 2022. And one of those adjusters testified as to what he'd experienced. Let's just hear a little bit of that testimony right now.
My name is Jordan Lee. I'm an independent insurance adjuster and I work for the insurance companies. It is my opinion that both the carriers and the adjusting firms are committing fraud by taking my estimates as well as other adjusters' estimates and manipulating them to reduce policyholder payouts. On multiple occasions, they have taken my estimate, GLR, and photo reports and manipulated and/or deleted the following: reports of hurricane-specific damages, line items related to hurricane damages, dollar amounts, and photographic evidence of damages from the documents I submitted in my claims, and then send those manipulated documents to the policyholders, drastically reducing their payouts with, my name on it, not anybody else's name.
What is the implication for somebody like Jordan Lee to have his name on these documents? And as you say, sometimes being contacted directly by the policyholders who are upset, understandably.
Right, the policyholders are calling them and extremely upset, and they're saying, "Well, that's not what I turned in." I mean, you heard Jordan, say that he was telling his policyholders that that's not what I did, and the it puts them in a very bad position, right? Because they're out there trying to help the policyholder. They're putting their eyes, their hands, they're seeing the damage, and then they're going back and they're writing what they feel is a proper estimate of damages for the insurance company to pay off of. And then the insurance companies are changing those estimates, lowering them, and sending them back to the policyholders. And it leaves the policyholder in a terrible position.
So after that testimony, what kind of reaction was there from that committee? Was there interest expressed in looking into that pattern of alleged fraud?
Well, they said there was, right? So we went back to, I think it was Rep. Rommel's office, and we did offer to show him some of the evidence that we had, and of course he didn't want to see it. We did turn the evidence that we had over to the Department of Financial Services, and the Department of Financial Services said that they were investigating it. Now this has been a little over 2 years now, and we've seen nothing from that.
And you've not heard any movement. So this company, this particular insurer in the case that we mentioned, did subsequent to the 60 Minutes piece, and we should say that this has also been reported on in the Washington Post, the Miami Herald, Tampa Bay Times. But this 60 Minutes piece, the month after that aired, the company Heritage did offer that couple over $300,000, far more than that $15,000 that they had offered initially. Does that make this go away? I mean, in your mind, does that make the couple whole and therefore solve that problem?
Well, I think it could resolve the underlying contractual obligation, right? But it does not get rid of the tort of fraud. The
And for
fraud,
people who don't know what a tort is, let's
yeah,
delve a little bit.
it's so. In other words, there's different areas of law, right? The contract is the policy of insurance, but they still committed, in our opinion, fraud against the policyholder by making them wait 2.5 years and totally misrepresenting the estimate. And when they got caught, They are like, "Oops, okay, here's your money. Please go away." And that's not the way it works, and they can't get away with that.
What about an effort that you recently have discussed is trying to get class status, a class action lawsuit based on this couple's experience and the experience of other homeowners?
We are looking into that. There's a lot of research that still has to take place before that can happen. You know, to bring any class action is a big hill to climb, and so our office is doing research into that, and we are hoping that eventually the courts will see things our way, and that we can bring a class status so that other policyholders who have been harmed by this fraud can get some justice.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Stephen Bush. He is a Jacksonville attorney, but he is representing clients statewide on an issue that he says amounts to insurance fraud. If you would like to join our conversation, you can call us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. We do have a couple of questions on social media. Stephen, um, this last one from Lisa on Facebook saying, does this fall under Jimmy Patronis? He, of course, is the chief financial officer in the state of Florida, and it is his office that regulates insurance.
You know, it's amazing to me that after Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helena, um, Mr. Petronas paraded around the state telling policyholders not to hire representatives for themselves, like public insurance adjusters. I just was astonished that he was sending out text messages and telling policyholders don't hire a public adjuster, don't hire anyone to help you and to represent you.
And he was basically saying, don't hire attorneys either, right?
Well, he was, and I don't think an attorney should be your first line that you go to. Um, there there are only two parties that can represent a policyholder. It's a public insurance adjuster and an attorney. I think a policyholder should always start with the public insurance adjuster.
And what's a public insurance adjuster as opposed to the adjuster that your insurance company sends out to you?
Right. So the adjuster that the insurance company sends out to you works for the insurance company. That adjuster works on behalf of the insurance company. A public insurance adjuster works on behalf of the policyholder and represents the policyholder in the policyholder's interest. And Mr. Petronas was parading around the state telling people not to hire anybody. That's kind of like you committing a murder, going before the judge, and the judge saying, "Hey, you don't need an attorney. We'll take care of you."
So this company, Heritage, was fined $1 million by regulators this past May. The Office of Insurance Regulation did it specifically because of how they handled claims after Hurricane Ian, which was this catastrophic Category 4 that hit Southwest Florida in September of 2022. It was the most expensive storm in the state's history to that point, and the Office of Insurance Regulation recommended this $1 million fine based on the lack of a response to to a homeowner's claims, very often not within the 90 days required, providing that aid that they're supposed to. But Jimmy Petronas opposed that fine.
I can't. Again, I don't understand where Mr. Petronas is coming from. I know that often we've heard that Florida has an insurance crisis, but the data has shown and proven out that the reasons why we have an insurance crisis is not because of the claims, it's not because of litigation, it's because of mismanagement of insurance companies.
We've got a question from Brenda on Facebook saying, how is this not bad faith?
Well, there's a difference between bad faith and fraud. All right.
And this is a legal definition?
That's right.
Explain
Right.
what bad faith is.
All right. So bad faith in property insurance, in the property insurance world, if you have a claim, the carrier has to abide by certain rules, right? And those rules are usually called the fair claim settlement practices. So if the insurance company has to handle a claim a certain way. If they don't handle that claim a certain way, that could be considered bad faith.
Can you give us an example?
Sure, like properly investigate the claim and then pay the claim promptly. Those are all two. That's two areas of the bad faith statute where the insurance company, and this is what we're talking about today, right, is handling the claim properly and then paying it promptly,
Mhm.
and paying it within a certain time periods. All of those are under the bad faith statute. But the fraud is a misrepresentation. It's a deceptive act. All right. That's a great way of kind of simplifying it,
Mhm.
if you will. So anytime an insurance company misrepresents or um, misrepresents in an order for them to benefit, that could be considered fraud.
So the gentleman that we heard from earlier, Jordan Lee, he's one of a handful of these insurance adjusters that have come forward, put their name and their reputation to basically whistleblowing on this practice. He told the Washington Post in an investigation they did, he said, I wrote 44 reports for heritage property and casualty, and 100% of them were altered to where I did not recognize them, every single one. Um, what is happening to the people that have come forward and openly criticized this practice?
Well, the whistleblowers are very brave, number one. It takes a lot of courage to come forward and to say, hey, something is wrong. And they're, the biggest fear that the whistleblowers had was that they were going to be blackballed and they weren't going to be able to take care of their families, that they were going to get work. And that did happen in some instances. Two of the whistleblowers have now crossed over and are now public insurance adjusters helping policyholders and no longer working on the insurance company side. But they've had a lot of criticism. They've taken a lot of hits, personally on their reputation, just because they came forward and said, hey, look, this is wrong and something needs to happen.
And we should say that the company that we've been talking about primarily, they're not the only ones that do this. Since that fine, earlier this year, they created a new director for governance and compliance, and they've implemented some software changes to, I guess, prevent or at least, you know, I guess prevent the kind of thing that you're talking about. When you were tracking down the changes that were made to these claims, how what sort of changes were you seeing and how quickly were those happening after someone turned in the estimates?
Well, we have one that's probably the most egregious I've ever seen. So on one of the files, you can, of course, with metadata and things of that sort, now you can track everything. So we were able to look, and one of the estimates, an adjuster for the third party administrator went into the estimate, and in 4 minutes, she sliced the estimate by 90% in 4 minutes.
And this was a relatively junior employee.
Yes, very new. She'd only been licensed as an adjuster for 6 months.
And so explain to people who may not know, I mean, how much time should it take if you're reviewing a claim and you're going to make some adjustments to it because perhaps this isn't covered or this should be less?
Well, if you think about it, 4 minutes is not really that long of a time. So by the time you open the file, you look at it, figure it all out. How are you going to slice it by 90%? The only thing that I can perceive is that she opened the file and just went to deleting. Didn't even look to investigate. Well, what were the damages? Did she look at the photographs beforehand? Those are all questions that need to be asked. But it was astonishing to me that in 4 minutes she could reduce an estimate. I think the original estimate was like 40 some odd thousand, and she reduced it down to like $3,000.
So this is all, you know, matters of policy, issues that have gone before the House here in Florida, lawsuits. Talk a little bit about the impact of delays on some of your clients. I mean, what does it mean to go past that 90-day reimbursement timetable that insurance companies are supposed to abide by?
Right. Well, if you think about it, for most people, their home is their largest asset, and they're there every day in that home, right? So when you have a storm, something happens, and you have damage to that house, you as an individual want the insurance company or whomever to move quickly, right, to get it repaired. So you're not sitting there looking at damaged walls or sheetrock removed or damaged floors or working around all that stuff during while you're at home. So it's devastating when people are not indemnified quickly. I have single mothers who have. I have one lady. She has single mother of two kids, working two jobs, just trying to make ends meet, and she doesn't have the money or the funds to get her house repaired. But yet she has two little kids, and she's got exposed wires. She's terrified that these kids are going to get electrocuted running around the house. She's watching them and trying to take care of them, but she can't keep an eye on them, all of the time. They're kids. And then, the widow whose husband just died, and she doesn't know what to do. It's just devastating to people. And then to know that they're not getting indemnified properly and quickly, it takes an emotional toll on people. I've had couples get divorced.
Mm. It also slows. I mean, you hear of people very often in the wake of a storm like this saying, I'm kind of done with this and deciding to move rather than rebuild. What does this process do to impede somebody's ability, say, to sell their condo if they are ready to move on?
Well, you're going to get your best price for your real estate if it's in perfect condition and it looks good. If it's not in perfect condition and it doesn't look very good, you're going to get a depreciated value for that property, which means you lose money. And again, for most people, their largest asset is their home. They take a hit. So now if you have a $500,000 house and it gets damaged and you don't have the money to repair it, you have to sell that house for $375,000. You don't have the money to go back to buy a home equal or equivalent to what you already had. So you're having to buy less.
So we're talking about a problem. You actually have some advice for people, though, that can help if they're anticipating this kind of circumstance or if they're in it. So let's start with just some of your recommendations because I think it would be helpful for people to know.
Yeah, the first thing you need to do is you need to get a full and complete copy of your policy. You need to know what your coverages are.
And do most people not have that when they sign their contract?
They don't. Your policy changes every year with endorsements, things of that sort.
And what is an endorsement?
So an endorsement can either add coverage or take away coverage. And it's usually found at the back of the policy. So when you request your policy, you want a full and complete copy of your policy with all endorsements. And then you need to go through the policy, the deck page. The deck page is not your full and complete copy of your policy.
What's a deck page?
It's usually the page that's at the front of the policy that lists out the coverages. It just lists them out in the dollar amounts, but it doesn't tell you how those coverages are applied. So you need to get the full policy so you understand.
Can you give us an example of something that might be on the deck page that appears to be covered but isn't?
One thing could be ordinance and law coverage. So if you have ordinance and law is like if you have a loss and then you have to repair your property and your property's not up to code, you have to bring it up to code. Ordinance and law will sometimes cover that. All right, so it may say that you have ordinance and law coverage on the deck page, but to what extent?
And so that would be spelled out in the endorsement.
That's right. And
Okay.
are there any limitations to that ordinance and law coverage?
What else can people do besides having their policy and reviewing their policy?
Again, it's know your coverages. You've got to know what's covered and what's not. So I was having dinner with some friends, and she said that she had just gotten a new policy, and I said, "Well, let me look at it." And so I looked at it, and I said, "What do you think your policy covers?" She says, "I have replacement cost value." I said, "No, you do not.
Mm.
You do not have replacement cost value. Your policy is actual cash value. So you're not going to get paid 100%." And she didn't even know that. She didn't understand that. The other thing she had was she had these new depreciation schedules. So, and I've calculated this on multiple policies. If you have a roof depreciation schedule and your roof is 12 years old or older, by the time they apply your deductible, you're going to get a zero payout.
Well,
A zero payout.
that would appear to impact a lot of people.
That's going to impact hundreds of thousands of people all throughout Florida. Those are things that you need to know. So get a full and complete copy of the policy, know what your coverages are, and then if you have a loss, you need to hire a public insurance adjuster.
At what point should somebody consider hiring an attorney? I mean, I ask you that. Obviously, you are an attorney; it's your business. But I mean, what would you tell a friend is a threshold at which point it would be helpful? And also, worth the money. Obviously, it's expensive to hire an attorney.
right? I think that you should hire an attorney after the public adjuster has exhausted all efforts and the insurance companies put their feet in the sand and said, no, we're just not going to pay you. That's when you should hire the attorney.
So there obviously is a lot of discussion about trying to keep insurance companies in Florida. And in fact, the Florida legislature has had a couple of special sessions essentially devoted to trying to find ways to keep insurers from fleeing. This is all about a more dangerous environment, much of it considered linked to a warming planet, Florida being particularly vulnerable. So I mean, is that what lawmakers are trying to balance, is the need to consider reimbursement for people who are damaged or suffer a loss, and then also just the larger picture of if this state doesn't have home insurance or people providing home insurance, nobody's going to be able to get a mortgage.
All right. So that's a great question and one that I've looked at. So we went 10 years without a hurricane until Hurricane Michael in 2016. 10 years, no hurricane. When Hurricane Michael came, then we had Irma right behind it. 7 insurance companies went out of business in the state of Florida. Why? Where are those 10 years worth of profits? And why didn't they have the reserves available to pay those claims when those claims came in? Why? And I don't think the legislature's asked that question. If they have, I haven't heard anything about it. Why didn't someone ask? So the Florida's Office of Insurance Regulation did a study after all of these insurance companies left, and it was the Residential Property Claims and Litigation Report, and people can look that up. And surprisingly, that report said overwhelmingly that the insurance companies that went out of business was because of mismanagement of funds and fraud. That's why they went out of business. So but yet all of the changes that the legislature made in 21, 22, and 23, it hurt policyholders. It did nothing to regulate why the carriers went out of business. Where are these funds? So where are these funds going? Well, insurance companies have what they call reinsurers, right? Well, a lot of these reinsurers are
That's like insurance companies for the insurance companies.
exactly. But guess who owns a lot of the reinsurers? The insurance companies. So they're just paying themselves money and then taking that money and putting it offshore.
We have a message from Lisa on Facebook. She says, such an important show. So glad to see this being discussed. I've seen this addressed in a Substack, but have seen little coverage on the alteration of adjusters' estimates and the significant reduction on the part of the insurance company. I mean, I would just ask you, this is it seems to be a somewhat new revelation in terms of the media coverage it's been getting. How important has that been to exposing this?
I think it's been great, and my goal and my hope is that this will change the way the industry as a whole approaches insurance claims to make it fair. It's just not fair to the policyholder, and it's stacked against them. And most policyholders don't know. They don't have a clue because insurance claims in the process is complicated. That's why I say hire a representative. You need someone helping you that knows how to do this and knows how to get you through this process so that you're not taken advantage of.
Just a message from Brenda on Facebook saying Stephen Bush and these personal adjusters are local heroes. Um, this is a continuing battle, obviously. What is the next step for you with your clients? And what do you think people will be watching on this story?
Well, I hope that we can get some legislative changes. I think that the legislature went too far in the changes that were made, and the pendulum has swung way too far in favor of the insurance companies. We need to bring it back to the center. Now, some of the changes that they made, I actually agree with. I think that they needed to be made, but I think they went too far. And I don't think that they went far enough in some areas to say, hey, look, you need more reserves. If you're an insurance carrier in the state of Florida, we know that we have more claims than any other state, right? Because of the weather conditions here and where we sit with the hurricanes. These insurance companies, if you're going to insure in the state of Florida, they need more regulation. And again, I'm not for more regulation, but in this instance, I think we do need more regulation on their reserves. so that one, there's the company as a whole is more stable and the market is more stable, right? Those are things that need to be addressed so that we can have a stable insurance market in Florida. And when the claims come, the insurance carriers are prepared. But well, you got to follow the money. Why 10 years? Why are we letting these insurance companies reinsure themselves and take that money and put it offshore?
Well, it's a great conversation, Stephen Bush. We appreciate you coming on, helping us thread through all of this complicated stuff, but we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.